Sticks and stones, the childhood saying goes, may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But again this week we have been reminded that sometimes that is a lie. Words hurt, words cut, words rightly or wrongly inflict pain, and words shouted in the current overheated political environment can play a role in pushing a small few to perpetrate an act of violence. James Hodgkinson, for example, the man who opened fire last year on congressional Republicans practicing for a baseball game. How about Dylan Roof's shooting of 9 Charleston church members in 2015? Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. Even Micah Johnson, the July 7th sniper who took the lives of 5 Dallas officers because he believed words objecting to police treatment were not enough. People like to argue that political discourse, no matter how angry or impassioned, is okay. It's not brain surgery. When in fact, in some ways, for some people, it is. Because with our words and tone, we create images, impressions about the world around us and the people in it. With our words and tone, we can inflame or inspire, esteem or belittle, embarrass or embrace, pushing some already on the edge to commit a criminal act. Forget all the finger pointing. Every practitioner of the You Too movement should understand there's enough blame in this to go around. Spoken, written, read, or posted words hold power, and in making our points should be chosen and expressed carefully. Sticks and stones may break bones, but words can potentially cause more damage. You can add your thoughts on Facebook. Look for WFAA.